8-foot alien. Queen laughed at the idea of breeding with a human until she got pregnant, reaches its dramatic apex as Aurelia goes into labor aboard the Imperial Dawn, while Pyrax attempts a violent coup. The unborn hybrid child manifests astonishing powers, disabling weapons across both fleets and creating a telepathic field that forces peace between their species, forever altering the destiny of two civilizations. The storm howled like a wounded beast outside the crashed shuttle. Commander Will Watson huddled closer to the emergency heating unit, his breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. The instrumentation panel of the ESS Hyperion's auxiliary craft flickered weakly, casting an eerie blue glow across his frost-nipped features. External sensors reported a merciless 40 degrees C beyond the buckled hull. Mayday! Mayday! This is Commander Will Watson of the Earth Space Service vessel Hyperion. Auxiliary craft down on uncharted ice planet at coordinates. He paused, squinting at the damaged navigation system. Coordinates uncertain, requesting immediate extraction. Static answered him, as it had for the past 18 hours. Will sighed, running a gloved hand through his dark hair. The shuttle's descent through the chaotic atmosphere had been brutal. Magnetic interference, ice storms, and finally, engine failure. A textbook disaster landing that, miraculously, he'd survived. The same couldn't be said for his communications array. He checked his powered armor's integrity. The exoskeleton suit, standard issue for ESS exploratory missions, had sustained minimal damage. Its internal environmental controls still functioned, which meant he wasn't freezing to death. Yet. The armor's enhanced strength capabilities would prove useful if he needed to venture outside. Computer, run terrain scan, 50-kilometer radius. The AI assistant in his helmet chirped acknowledgement. Scan limited by atmospheric interference, detecting large crystalline formations, 2 kilometers north-northwest. Possible shelter location. Will nodded grimly. With oxygen reserves depleting and the shuttle's power cells damaged beyond repair, staying put meant certain death. The Hyperion wouldn't miss him for at least another 36 hours, when he failed to make his scheduled check-in. By then, it would be too late. Plot the most efficient route, he commanded, reaching for his survival pack. 10 minutes later, Will pushed through the emergency airlock into the howling blizzard. His visor immediately frosted over before the armor's heating elements cleared it. The wind threatened to knock him off his feet despite the exoskeleton's stabilizers. Hunching forward, he trudged into the white abyss, following the navigation marker blinking at the corner of his heads-up display. The journey was punishing. Twice he nearly fell into hidden crevasses, saved only by his armor's enhanced reflexes. The crystalline formations gradually materialized through the swirling snow, massive, translucent structures that rose like the spires of an alien cathedral. As he drew closer, Will realized they weren't natural formations at all, but constructed architecture, their surfaces too precise, too purposeful. Computer, scan for artificial components. Detecting refined metals and energy signatures consistent with advanced technology. Structure appears to be an outpost or monitoring station. Warning, detecting movement inside. Will's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm. First contact protocols flashed through his mind. Approach with caution. Display non-threatening posture. Attempt communication. Before he could decide on his next move, a section of the crystal wall slid open silently. Will froze, his breath catching in his throat. The figure that emerged stood easily, 8 feet tall, with proportions similar to a human female, but distinctly alien. Her skin shimmered with a sunset hue, oranges and purples that seemed to shift beneath a translucent epidermis. 4 arms extended from a torso protected by what appeared to be ceremonial armor. And in one hand, she carried a weapon resembling a spear, its tip glowing with pulsing plasma energy. Most striking were her eyes, large, vertical pupils set in iridescent violet orbs that studied him with unmistakable intelligence. A crown-like structure of crystalline material adorned her head, suggesting status or rank. The alien spoke, her voice a melodic series of clicks and hums that Will's universal translator struggled to process. After a moment, fractured words emerged. Intruder. Identify purpose. This outpost. Sovereign territory. Solarian Empire. Will slowly raised his hands, making his movements deliberate. Commander Will Watson, Earth Space Service. My vessel crashed. I seek shelter from the storm. I come in peace. The alien tilted her head, those fascinating eyes narrowing. Humans, always claiming peace while expanding territories. Her translator seemed more sophisticated than his, her English surprisingly fluid despite an unusual cadence. Your kind edges closer to our borders each cycle. I'm not here to claim territory, Will replied cautiously. Just trying to survive until my ship can locate me. The alien stepped closer, towering over him, even with his powered armor. Will felt small and vulnerable. Her spear hummed ominously as she raised it. I am Queen Aurelia, sovereign of the 8th dynasty, ruler of 17 star systems. You are now my prisoner, human. Your presence will be instructive. The High Council has been curious about your species' rapid expansion. Before Will could protest, 2 more aliens emerged from the structure, each carrying similar weapons. With no realistic chance of fighting or escaping, he reluctantly allowed himself to be escorted inside the crystal outpost. The interior was surprisingly warm, illuminated by soft blue light emanating from the walls themselves. The architecture followed organic curves rather than angular human designs, creating an almost underwater feeling. Will was led through several chambers until they reached what appeared to be a command center, filled with holographic displays and control interfaces. Remove your protective shell, Queen Aurelia commanded, gesturing at his armor. Will hesitated. With respect, Your Majesty, the atmospheric composition is perfectly compatible with your physiology, she interrupted. Our scans are thorough. Your reluctance suggests either fear or deception. Which is it, Commander? Will carefully disengaged his helmet seals, ready to reactivate them at the first sign of respiratory distress. When nothing happened after several breaths, he removed the helmet completely. The air tasted strange, slightly metallic with hints of something like cinnamon, but breathable. Aurelia studied his exposed face with undisguised curiosity. Smaller than I expected, she remarked. Your species' reputation for bravado exceeds your physical presence. Will couldn't help but smile slightly. We compensate with intelligence and adaptability. So you claim, she circled him, her multiple arms moving independently as she operated various controls. Yet, here you are, crashed and captured, at the mercy of beings you didn't know existed until moments ago. Everyone has bad days, Will shrugged, tracking her movements. Even queens. I imagine. Her eyes flashed. Imperial dignity doesn't allow for bad days. Human. We succeed, or we die gloriously. A sudden, violent tremor shook the station, sending several crystalline objects crashing to the floor. The holographic displays flickered, and alarms began to sound. One of Aurelia's subordinates rushed in, speaking rapidly in their native tongue. The Queen's expression darkened as she responded, her tone sharp and commanding. What's happening? Will asked. Aurelia turned to him, irritation evident. A consequence of your unscheduled arrival. Your ship's descent triggered a tectonic instability. The ice shelf is fracturing beneath us. And now a Class 5 storm surge approaches. The exit passage has collapsed. Can we evacuate? There is no we, prisoner. And no, not until the storm abates. My transport is secured in a hangar beneath us, but the connecting passage is now blocked by ice. Will processed this information quickly. I have expertise in structural reinforcement and terrain scanning. If you allow me access to my armor systems, I might be able to help stabilize the station and find an alternative route. Aurelia's laugh was surprisingly melodic. You offer assistance to your captor? Human psychology continues to confound our scholars. I prefer survival to imperial dignity, Will replied evenly. Especially when they're not mutually exclusive. She studied him for a long moment, those alien eyes unreadable. Finally, she nodded. Very well, Commander. You may prove useful before your inevitable interrogation. But know this, my guards will terminate you at the first sign of treachery. Understood, Your Majesty. I'd expect nothing less. And so began an uneasy alliance forged by necessity. As beyond the crystal walls, the storm intensified, and the planet itself seemed determined to bury them both in ice. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of urgent repairs and calculations. Will, back in his armor but with helmet removed, worked alongside Aurelia's technicians to stabilize the outpost's structural integrity. His armor's sensors, designed for exploring unknown environments, proved invaluable in mapping the spreading fractures in the ice shelf. The main support column needs reinforcement, Will explained, projecting a three-dimensional hologram from his armor's computer. If we redirect energy from these secondary systems to strengthen the force field here and here, we should buy ourselves another 48 hours. Aurelia studied the projection intently. Despite her initial hostility, she'd proven to be remarkably analytical and quick to grasp engineering concepts foreign to her experience. Her four arms moved with practiced precision across control surfaces as she implemented his suggestions. Your solution is elegant, she admitted reluctantly, though your technology seems primitive compared to Solarian standards. Will smiled. Sometimes primitive is more adaptable. Your systems are impressively advanced, but they're designed for specific parameters. My equipment is built to function in unknown conditions. A philosophy reflected in your species' approach to expansion, she observed. Humans adapt quickly, with little regard for established boundaries. We're explorers by nature, Will countered, making an adjustment to a power coupling. We seek knowledge and understanding, not conquest. Aurelia made a sound that his translator interpreted as skeptical amusement. Yet you bring weapons to your explorations. For protection, not aggression. The universe isn't always friendly. On that, she said, her violet eyes meeting his. We can agree. As the immediate crisis stabilized, Will was permitted limited movement within the outpost under guard. The station, he learned, was a royal retreat and scientific outpost, where Aurelia occasionally withdrew from her imperial duties to pursue personal research. Only a small staff accompanied her, which explained the limited resources available for their predicament. On the third day, with the storm still raging outside, Aurelia summoned Will to what appeared to be a laboratory. Various biological specimens were suspended in illuminated containers, and holographic displays showed cellular structures in minute detail. Your species fascinates me, she said without preamble. So physically unimpressive, yet you've expanded across 57 star systems in less than 3 centuries. Will approached cautiously, noting with interest the specimens she was studying. We're resourceful and curious. Indeed. She gestured to a platform in the center of the room. I wish to study your physiology more thoroughly. Stand there. Will hesitated. What exactly does this study entail? Non-invasive scans, she assured him. I am a xenobiologist by training. Before my royal obligations, your species has avoided formal contact with the Empire, so our data is limited. Seeing little choice, Will complied, stepping onto the platform. A field of soft light enveloped him, tingling slightly against his skin. Remarkable, Aurelia murmured, examining the data streaming across her displays. Your cellular structure shows signs of artificial enhancement. Standard genetic optimization, Will explained. Disease resistance, radiation tolerance, extended lifespan. Nothing too dramatic. Yet you maintain genetic diversity, she noted. The Solarian approach favors purity and specialization. Each bloodline is cultivated for specific traits. Will watched her work, struck by the precision of her movements. Despite having 4 arms, there was nothing awkward or alien about her dexterity. Rather, it possessed a kind of hypnotic grace. That seems limiting, he ventured. Diversity drives adaptation and evolution. Aurelia's eyes flashed with something. Amusement? Irritation? Our empire has endured for 12,000 years. Commander, your civilization has barely emerged from planetary confinement. Youth has its advantages, Will countered. Fresh perspectives, fewer entrenched traditions. To his surprise, Aurelia's expression softened slightly. Perhaps my own research has challenged certain imperial doctrines regarding genetic determinism. It is partly why I retreat to this outpost, to pursue inquiries that might be considered unorthodox at court. This revelation intrigued Will. A rebel queen? She silenced him with a look, but there was less hostility in it than before. Refinement is not rebellion, Commander. I seek to strengthen the Empire, not undermine it. The scan completed, and Will stepped down from the platform. Thank you for sharing your work with me. Cultural exchange is valuable, even between captor and prisoner. Is that how you see this interaction? As cultural exchange? Will smiled. What would you call it? For the first time, Aurelia seemed momentarily at a loss for words. Then, recovering her regal demeanor, she dismissed him with a gesture. Sufficient data has been collected. Return to your quarters. But as Will was led away, he could feel her eyes following him, and sensed that something had shifted in their dynamic, something neither of them had anticipated. Days stretched into weeks as the storm cycle on the planet proved more persistent than either of them had expected. Communication with both the Hyperion and Aurelia's Imperial forces remained impossible through the atmospheric disturbance. The outpost, though damaged, provided sufficient resources for survival, and a tentative routine developed. Will continued to assist with repairs and maintenance, his practical knowledge complementing the Solarians' theoretical expertise. In return, Aurelia gradually allowed him greater access to the outpost's facilities, including their database of stellar cartography, which filled significant gaps in human knowledge of this sector. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. Will shared stories of Earth and human history, while Aurelia spoke of the Solarian homeworlds and their ancient traditions. Despite their physical differences and the circumstances of their meeting, a surprising camaraderie emerged. One evening, as they shared a meal in Aurelia's private chambers, a privilege Will recognized as significant, she asked an unexpected question. "Do you have a mate, Commander?" Will nearly choked on his food, a synthetic protein designed to be compatible with his physiology. No. My career doesn't lend itself to stable relationships." "Why do you ask?" Aurelia's skin shimmered with subtle color changes that Will had come to recognize as emotional indicators. This particular pattern suggested embarrassment or uncertainty, rare displays from the usually confident queen. "Solarian royalty traditionally mates for strategic alliances," she explained, her 4 hands moving in what seemed like nervous gestures. "My selection was scheduled for the next imperial cycle, a genetic match with the 7th house of Pyrex." "Sounds romantic," Will commented dryly. "Romance is a human concept," she replied, though without her usual dismissiveness. "We prioritize genetic compatibility and political advantage." "And does that make you happy?" The question clearly startled her. "Happiness is irrelevant to imperial duty." Will leaned forward. "With respect, Your Majesty, that doesn't answer my question." Their eyes met across the table, and for a long moment, neither spoke. Something electric passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared isolation despite their vastly different lives. Aurelia finally broke the silence. The storm is weakening. Within days, communication should be possible. Your people will come for you, and I will return to my duties. Yes, Will agreed, feeling a surprising pang of regret. I suppose we'll both return to our proper worlds. Later that night, unable to sleep, Will wandered to the observation dome at the outpost's peak. The storm had indeed begun to clear, revealing glimpses of stars between racing clouds. The sight should have brought relief. Rescue was now a real possibility, but instead, he felt strangely melancholy. He didn't hear Aurelia approach until she spoke. Beautiful, isn't it? This world was once an imperial paradise before the climate shifted. These storms are relatively recent, the last 1,000 years or so. Will turned to find her standing closer than usual, her ceremonial armor replaced by simpler attire that accentuated her alien, yet undeniably feminine form. 1,000 years is recent? She smiled, a gesture she'd adopted from him over their weeks together. Perspective, Commander. My dynasty alone has ruled for 3,000. Will, he said quietly, after all this time, you might as well use my name. Will, she repeated, the word sounding exotic in her accent. A curious name. In our language, it would translate as determiner of fate. He laughed softly. Probably giving me too much credit there. She moved beside him, her height allowing her to look down into his eyes. I do not think so. You have determined much since your arrival, including... She hesitated, her skin rippling with colors Will hadn't seen before. Including certain reconsiderations on my part. Reconsiderations? Aurelia's lower hand tentatively reached toward his, hesitating just shy of contact. Regarding interspecies dynamics, compatibility, possibilities I had not contemplated. Will's heart began racing as he understood her implication. Slowly, carefully, he bridged the gap between their hands. Her skin was warmer than human temperature, with a texture like smooth suede. The contact sent a tingling sensation up his arm. Aurelia, he whispered, her name feeling intimate without her title. Are you suggesting what I think you're suggesting? Her laugh was soft, musical. The idea of breeding with a human would have seemed absurd to me before your arrival. Our physiologies are so different, our cultures worlds apart. And now? Will asked, scarcely breathing. In answer, she leaned down, pressing her forehead against his, in what he'd learned was a deeply intimate Solarian gesture. Now, Will, determiner of fate, I find myself curious about impossible things. That night changed everything between them. Physical intimacy between such different species required patience, creativity, and no small amount of laughter at awkward moments. But what might have been merely an exotic encounter grew into something deeper, more profound, as their bodies and minds found unexpected harmony. In the quiet aftermath, as they lay entwined in her chambers, Aurelia traced patterns on his chest with one of her slender fingers. This complicates matters considerably. You realize, Will kissed the crystalline crown that he now knew was part of her body, not a removable ornament. I've never been good at keeping things simple. The Empire would consider this a transgression of the highest order, she murmured. Royal bloodlines are sacred. And Earth isn't exactly prepared for interspecies diplomacy at this level either, he acknowledged. But maybe we're pioneers in more ways than one. She raised herself on her lower arms to look at him seriously. Will, when communications are restored, we must make difficult decisions. My duties, your service. He silenced her with a kiss, still marveling at how natural it felt despite their differences. Let's worry about that tomorrow. Tonight is just for us. But tomorrow arrived sooner than expected. At dawn, alarms blared throughout the outpost. Will and Aurelia rushed to the command center to find her technicians in a state of agitation. "What's happening?" Aurelia demanded. "Communications restored, Majesty," the chief technician reported. "But we're detecting multiple ships entering orbit, Solarian Imperial Fleet, and one Earth vessel." Will's pulse quickened. "The Hyperion! They found us!" But Aurelia's expression was grave. "The Imperial ships are battle cruisers, led by the flagship Imperial Dawn. This is not a standard rescue deployment." She turned to her communications officer. "Establish contact." The main screen flickered to life, revealing the stern face of a male Solarian in elaborate military regalia. His skin was darker than Aurelia's, with markings that suggested great age and status. "Your Majesty," he began formally, "the High Council is relieved to find you alive. We feared the worst when your outpost went silent." "High Commander Pyrax," Aurelia acknowledged coolly. "Your concern is noted, though a full battle group seems excessive for a wellness check." Pyrax's eyes narrowed as he noticed Will standing beside her. "I see the reports of human encroachment were accurate. Has this creature harmed you, Majesty?" "Commander Watson is my guest," Aurelia replied, her voice taking on the imperial tone Will hadn't heard since their first meeting. "He has been instrumental in maintaining this outpost during the crisis." "Guest?" Pyrax's disgust was evident. "Humans are expanding aggressively into territory claimed by the Empire. They are not guests, but invaders." Will stepped forward. "My presence here was accidental. High Commander, I've made no territorial claims." "Silence!" Pyrax snapped. "Your Majesty, I must insist you transfer to the Imperial Dawn immediately. The human vessel in orbit has been warned not to approach. Once you are safely aboard, we will neutralize this outpost to prevent any technology from falling into human hands." Aurelia's 4 hands clenched simultaneously. "You overstep your authority. Pyrax, this outpost is royal property, and I will determine its disposition. The High Council has granted me emergency powers." Pyrax countered smoothly. "In light of the human threat and your prolonged isolation with their agent, your judgment is considered potentially compromised." Will exchanged a worried glance with Aurelia. This was rapidly escalating beyond a simple rescue mission. "I will transfer to the Imperial Dawn," Aurelia declared suddenly, causing Will's heart to sink. "But Commander Watson comes with me, under my personal protection. His vessel must be informed that he is unharmed and will be returned through proper diplomatic channels." Pyrax's expression darkened further. "This is most irregular, Majesty. Nevertheless, those are my terms. Prepare for our arrival within the hour." When the communication ended, Will turned to her in confusion. "What are you doing? If I go with you, I'll be at the mercy of your people, at least here." "Here you would be atomized when they destroy the outpost," she interrupted. "Pyrax is not making an idle threat. He has wanted me removed from power for decades. I'm too progressive for his faction's tastes. This situation gives him the perfect opportunity." "So I'm what, a bargaining chip?" Aurelia took his face in her hands. "You are far more than that, Will. But there is something else you must know." She hesitated, her skin cycling through emotional colors, before settling on a deep, resonant blue he'd never seen before. "Our intimacy has had an unexpected consequence, one that should be biologically impossible." Will stared at her, uncomprehending for a moment, before the implication hit him like a physical blow. "You're pregnant. But how? Our species are apparently more compatible than either of our sciences believed possible," she finished. "My royal physiology has certain adaptabilities that may have facilitated this miracle. The Imperial doctors will confirm it when we board." Will's mind reeled with the implications. A human Solarian child, the first of its kind. "Which is precisely why we cannot be separated now," Aurelia said urgently. This child represents something unprecedented, a bridge between our species that could transform relations between humans and the Empire. But Pyrax and his conservatives would see it destroyed as an abomination. Will's protective instincts flared immediately. "I won't let that happen." She smiled sadly. "Your determination is admirable, but we will be vastly outnumbered. We must be strategic." "The Hyperion," Will said suddenly. "If I could contact my ship, explain the situation. One exploration vessel against an Imperial battle group? We don't need to defeat them," Will insisted. "Just create enough confusion to buy time. Captain Reynolds is resourceful, and Earth would be very interested in peaceful contact with your Empire, rather than conflict." Aurelia considered this, then nodded decisively. "Very well. While my transport is prepared, you will send a coded message to your vessel. But we must be subtle. Pyrax will be monitoring all communications." An hour later, Will found himself aboard a Solarian royal shuttle, ascending toward the massive Imperial flagship visible in orbit. Beside him, Aurelia sat regally composed, though he could sense her tension. They had managed to send a brief, encrypted message to the Hyperion before departure, but had received no confirmation of receipt. The shuttle docked smoothly with the Imperial Dawn, a vessel whose scale dwarfed anything in Earth's fleet. As they disembarked, they were met by an honor guard of Solarian soldiers and a medical team. High Commander Pyrax stood waiting, his elaborate uniform gleaming under the ship's lights. "Your Majesty," he bowed formally. "I have arranged for immediate medical evaluation. Your prolonged exposure to that harsh environment is concerning." "How thoughtful," Aurelia replied with cold courtesy. "Commander Watson will accompany me." Pyrax's eyes narrowed. "The human should be secured in the detention level until—" "The human remains with me," Aurelia interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "As my personal scientific advisor and diplomatic liaison." The look Pyrax gave Will was venomous, but he didn't challenge the Queen directly. "As you wish, Majesty. Though the High Council will have questions about this arrangement." They were escorted to the medical bay, a vast chamber filled with technology far beyond Earth's capabilities. Aurelia submitted to examination, while Will remained close, watched suspiciously by armed guards. The chief physician, a female Solarian with intricate facial markings, conducted several scans before stepping back with a visible expression of shock. She whispered urgently to Aurelia, who nodded calmly, as if receiving expected news. Pyrax, observing from the doorway, noticed the physician's reaction and strode forward. "What is it? What have you found?" The physician hesitated, looking to Aurelia for permission to speak. The Queen inclined her head slightly. "Her Majesty is with child," the physician announced, her voice carefully neutral. Pyrax froze. Then his expression contorted with rage as he turned to Will. You have defiled our Queen. This is an act of war against the Empire." "Stand down, Pyrax," Aurelia commanded sharply. "This child was conceived through mutual consent and represents a historic opportunity for both our peoples." "Abomination," Pyrax spat. "The royal bloodline contaminated by human genetics? The High Council will never accept this." "The High Council serves the crown, not the reverse," Aurelia reminded him, rising to her full height. "And this child is the heir to that crown." Pyrax's hand moved to his sidearm. "I cannot allow this to proceed. For the good of the Empire, this pregnancy must be terminated and the human executed." Will tensed, prepared to defend Aurelia despite the overwhelming odds. But before anyone could act, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms blared throughout the vessel. "We're under attack," a voice announced over the communication system. "Human vessels have appeared from hyperspace. Multiple signatures." Pyrax's attention snapped away from them. "Impossible! There was only one human ship." Will couldn't suppress a smile. Captain Reynolds had received their message and called for reinforcements. The ship rocked again with another impact. "Shields at 80%, reported a tactical officer who had rushed into the medical bay. "The humans are targeting our weapon systems specifically. Precision strikes only." "They're not trying to destroy the ship," Will explained. "Just neutralize it. This doesn't have to escalate into war." "Return fire," Pyrax ordered, ignoring him. "Launch fighters and inform the battle group to target the human vessels." "Belay that order," Aurelia countermanded. "I am still your queen, Pyrax, and I will not allow you to start an interspecies war." The Imperial Guards looked between them in confusion, uncertain whose orders to follow. Pyrax seized the moment of hesitation. "The Queen is compromised by her association with the human and her condition," he declared. "As High Commander, I am invoking the ancient right of regency during sovereign incapacity." He drew his weapon and aimed it directly at Aurelia. "You will be confined for your own protection, Majesty, until the High Council can address this situation. The abomination will be removed for the purity of the royal line." Will lunged forward instinctively, but was restrained by two guards. Aurelia remained impossibly calm, her eyes locked with Pyrax's. "You have wanted this moment for decades, haven't you, Pyrax?" she asked softly. "To finally seize power from my progressive influence." "I serve the Empire," he insisted. "Your genetic experimentations and fascination with lesser species have long concerned the conservative houses. This human infiltrator has merely accelerated the inevitable." Another explosion rocked the ship more violently than before. "Direct hit to primary power coupling," someone reported urgently. "Weapon systems offline." "How?" Pyrax demanded. "Our shields should have—" He was interrupted by a strange phenomenon. A soft, pulsing light began to emanate from Aurelia's abdomen, growing in intensity until it illuminated the entire medical bay. Everyone present, including Will, stared in astonishment. "The child," the physician whispered in awe. "It's generating some kind of energy field." The light spread throughout the room, then beyond, visible through the ship's interior viewports as it traveled along corridors and into other chambers. Where it touched electronic systems, they either shut down or began operating independently of their controllers. "What is happening?" Pyrax demanded, his weapon still trained on Aurelia, but his confidence visibly shaken. Aurelia's expression was one of wonder rather than fear. "Life finds a way, Pyrax. Even between species your narrow mind considers incompatible." The ship's artificial gravity fluctuated momentarily. Then, to everyone's astonishment, Pyrax's weapon floated out of his hand, along with every other weapon in the medical bay. They hovered in the air, then disassembled themselves piece by piece, the components orbiting in the strange energy field like tiny satellites. The guards restraining Will suddenly released him, stepping back with expressions of confusion. Will moved immediately to Aurelia's side, placing a protective hand over her glowing abdomen. "The child," he murmured. "It's protecting us?" "More than that," Aurelia said softly. "I can feel it. Our child is communicating, not with words but with intention. It wants peace." Throughout the ship, systems began coming back online, but operating independently of their controllers. View screens activated, showing images of both the human and Solarian vessels, highlighting their similarities rather than differences. Weapon systems remained disabled, while life support and communication channels strengthened. In the confusion, the ship's communications officer burst into the medical bay. "Your Majesty, High Commander, we're receiving a unified signal from both fleets. All vessels report the same phenomenon. Some kind of energy wave has disabled weapons, but enhanced communications. The humans are requesting a diplomatic channel." Will and Aurelia exchanged a look of shared amazement. Their unborn child, only just confirmed to exist, was already changing the course of history between their species. Pyrax stood frozen, his authority and certainty crumbling before this inexplicable event. This is some kind of human technological attack, he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. No technology could do this, the physician countered, scanning the energy field with her instruments. This is biological in nature. The hybrid embryo is somehow generating a field that interacts with both organic and inorganic systems. It's miraculous. Aurelia's voice took on a new authority, not just that of a queen, but of a mother protecting the future. Pyrax, your coup has failed. Our child has shown more wisdom in its first conscious act than you have demonstrated in centuries of service. Stand down now, and I may show mercy. The energy field intensified around Pyrax, lifting him slightly off the floor, his face contorted with the struggle to move. But he found himself completely immobilized. This changes nothing, he gasped. The conservative houses will never accept a hybrid heir. They will have little choice, Aurelia replied calmly. Particularly when they see what this child can do. Unite rather than divide. The very trait you fear most is what will strengthen our empire. She turned to the communications officer. Establish the diplomatic channel with the human vessels. Inform Captain Reynolds that Commander Watson is safe and that the Empire is ready for preliminary peace discussions. Will squeezed her hand, overwhelmed with pride and wonder. Our child isn't even born yet, and already it's a better diplomat than either of our species. Aurelia's laugh was genuine, joyful. Perhaps we should name it accordingly. As the energy field gently receded, Pyrax collapsed to the floor, immediately surrounded by guards whose allegiance had decisively shifted back to their queen. The ship's systems returned to normal operation, though weapons remained offline across both fleets. Take the High Commander to the detention level, Aurelia ordered. He will stand trial for treason when we return to the imperial capital. She paused, then added with magnanimity. Ensure he is treated with the dignity befitting his former rank. Our new era begins with compassion, not vengeance. As Pyrax was led away, his once proud posture now defeated, Will turned to Aurelia. What happens now? She placed all four of her hands on her abdomen, where the glow had dimmed to a soft pulse. Now, Commander Will Watson of Earth, we rewrite the future of two civilizations. Together. The following hours were a whirlwind of diplomatic activity. Captain Reynolds and a small delegation from the Hyperion were permitted to board the Imperial Dawn, an unprecedented event in Solarian history. Will embraced his old friend and superior officer with relief and excitement. You took your time, Mark, he said with a grin. Captain Reynolds shook his head in amazement. We were preparing a rescue operation when your coded message arrived. Potential first contact situation. Request diplomatic support. Bit of an understatement, wouldn't you say? Had to call in every favor I had to get this response fleet assembled. Perfect timing, Will assured him. Any later and I might have been executed for royal seduction. Reynolds raised an eyebrow, looking past Will to where Aurelia was conferring with her advisors. So the rumors are true. You and the alien queen? It's a long story, Will admitted. One that's about to get a lot more complicated. She's pregnant, Mark, with my child. To his credit, Reynolds maintained his composure, though his eyes widened considerably. Biologically impossible. Apparently not. And the baby already has some unusual abilities. It basically prevented an interspecies war before it was even properly formed. Reynolds ran a hand through his graying hair. The Admiralty is going to have a field day with this report. Focus on the diplomatic opportunity, Will suggested. The Solarian Empire controls 17 systems and technology centuries beyond ours. This baby could be the key to peaceful relations instead of the territorial conflict that was brewing. Always the optimist, Reynolds sighed, though not unkindly. Well, let's make the most of this mess you've created, shall we? Together, they joined Aurelia and her loyal commanders at the conference table. The initial discussions were tentative, filled with the careful language of diplomats, feeling out unfamiliar territory. But as hours passed, the atmosphere warmed. Aurelia's authority, bolstered by the miraculous intervention of her unborn child, was now unquestioned among her people. Even the most skeptical Solarian officers seemed awed by the implications of a hybrid child with such extraordinary abilities. By ship's dawn, preliminary agreements had been reached. A joint human-Solarian commission would be established to explore peaceful cooperation. The contested border regions would be designated as shared research zones, rather than military flashpoints. And perhaps most significantly, the existence of the hybrid child would be publicly acknowledged as a symbol of the new relationship between species. As the meeting adjourned, Aurelia requested a private moment with Will. They retreated to her royal chambers aboard the flagship, finally able to process the whirlwind of events. "Your captain seems a reasonable man," she observed, settling carefully onto a cushioned recliner designed for her tall frame. Will nodded, taking a seat beside her. "Reynolds is pragmatic. He sees the advantage in peace over conflict." He placed a gentle hand over her abdomen, where the soft glow occasionally pulsed. "How are you feeling?" "Strange," she admitted. "Solarian pregnancies typically last 14 months. But with this being unprecedented, the physicians are unsure what to expect." "Are you in any danger?" Will asked, concern evident in his voice. She covered his hand with one of hers. "The royal bloodline has certain genetic adaptabilities built in over millennia of selective breeding. It's likely why conception was possible at all. But yes, there are risks." Her other hands moved in a gesture he'd come to recognize as contemplative. "Risks I am willing to embrace." Will leaned forward to press his forehead against hers in the Solarian intimate gesture. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Aurelia's skin rippled with emotional colors, warmth, affection, and something deeper that transcended their cultural differences. "The conservatives will not surrender easily. Pyrax has supporters throughout the Empire who share his views on genetic purity. And Earth will have its own xenophobes and fearmongers," Will acknowledged. "But they don't speak for all of us, just as Pyrax doesn't represent all Solarians." "Our child will need protection," she said softly, "and guidance to understand its unique heritage." Will smiled. "Based on today's demonstration, I think our baby might be the one protecting us." Aurelia laughed, the musical sound he'd grown to love. "Even so, we must build a world worthy of such a miracle." The days that followed saw rapid developments on both diplomatic and personal fronts. The joint fleet traveled to the nearest Solarian outpost world, New Salaris, where more formal negotiations could take place in appropriate surroundings. Will served as Earth's primary representative, while Aurelia balanced her royal duties with her increasingly evident pregnancy. The Solarian medical team, supplemented by human doctors from the Hyperion, monitored the unprecedented gestation with fascination. The hybrid embryo developed at an accelerated rate compared to either species' norms, and continued to exhibit unusual energy signatures that defied conventional science. Pyrax's supporters made one attempt to rescue the queen from her human captors. But the plot was quickly neutralized. The would-be coup leaders found their weapons mysteriously malfunctioning, and their communications scrambled. Further evidence of the unborn child's protective capabilities. 3 months after the historic meeting aboard the Imperial Dawn, as diplomatic frameworks were being finalized between Earth and the Solarian Empire, Aurelia went into unexpected labor. The Royal Medical Facility on New Salaris became the center of attention for both species, as updates were anxiously awaited. Will paced outside the delivery chamber, having been temporarily excluded due to a complex Solarian royal birthing ritual. Captain Reynolds waited with him, providing moral support. "Breathe, Commander," Reynolds advised. "From what I understand, Solarian births are typically less traumatic than human ones." "Typically," Will emphasized. "Nothing about this is typical." The door finally opened, and the chief physician emerged. Her expression was unreadable to human eyes, but her voice conveyed wonder. "Commander Watson, Her Majesty asks for you." Will rushed inside to find Aurelia reclining in a pool of luminescent fluid, looking exhausted but radiant. In her upper arms, she cradled a small bundle that emitted a soft, pulsing glow. "Will," she said softly, "meet your daughter." He approached cautiously, overcome with emotion. The infant was smaller than a Solarian newborn, but larger than a human baby. Her skin displayed a mesmerizing blend of human tones and Solarian color-shifting capabilities, currently cycling through soft pastels. Most striking were her eyes, human in shape but with the iridescent quality of her mother's species. "She's perfect," Will whispered, gently touching the child's cheek. The baby responded by intensifying her glow, and Will felt a wave of emotion that seemed to come from outside himself, a sense of recognition and pure love. "She communicates empathically," Aurelia explained. "The physicians believe it's related to her energy manipulation abilities. She's connecting with us on a level beyond words." "What shall we name her?" Will asked. As the baby wrapped tiny fingers, 5 per hand, a human trait, around his index finger, Aurelia's eyes shimmered with emotion. "I was thinking, Aurora Dawn. Aurora for the Earth phenomenon you described to me, and Dawn for the ship where her existence was first confirmed. In Solarian tradition, it would translate roughly to Light Bringer." "Aurora Dawn Watson Aurelia." Will tested the name. "Quite a legacy to live up to." "We will call her Rory," Aurelia decided with a smile, "until she's old enough to choose her own formal name." The baby, Rory, glowed brighter at the sound of her name, sending another wave of emotional warmth through both parents. News of the successful birth spread quickly through both fleets and beyond. Official announcements were carefully coordinated by human and Solarian authorities, emphasizing the historic nature of the event and its implications for peaceful relations. Public reactions were mixed, as expected, but the predominant response was curiosity rather than hostility. Rory's unusual abilities manifested more clearly in the weeks following her birth. She could manipulate energy fields to create visual displays, affect electronic systems, and most remarkably, facilitate understanding between different species. When humans and Solarians found themselves at an impasse during negotiations, Rory's presence in the room invariably led to breakthrough moments of mutual comprehension. "She's a natural diplomat," Captain Reynolds remarked after one such session. "Breaks down barriers we don't even realize are there." 3 months after Rory's birth, as her abilities stabilized and the initial medical concerns abated, preparations began for a formal presentation to the combined delegations from Earth and the Solarian Empire. The Great Hall of New Salaris was chosen for the historic event, its crystalline architecture reminiscent of the outpost where Will and Aurelia had first met. On the morning of the ceremony, Will adjusted his formal Earth Space Service dress uniform, while Aurelia was attended by royal handmaidens. Rory, now the size of a human 1-year-old, though only 3 months old, watched the proceedings with intelligent eyes that seemed to understand the significance of the day. "Are you nervous?" Will asked Aurelia, as her attendants withdrew to give them a private moment. "Queens do not experience nervousness," she replied, with a hint of her old imperial haughtiness, before breaking into a smile. "But yes, terribly so. Today will shape the future of both our peoples." Will took her hands in his. "Whatever happens, we've already achieved something remarkable." He nodded toward Rory, who was contentedly manipulating small orbs of light that she had generated above her crib. Aurelia's expression softened as she gazed at their daughter. "Indeed, though I never imagined myself as the queen who would break 12,000 years of genetic tradition. You're the queen who expanded the definition of tradition to include growth and adaptation," Will corrected. Exactly what the Empire needs to thrive for another 12,000 years. A chime sounded, indicating it was time. Will lifted Rory into his arms, marveling as always at how she instinctively adjusted her body temperature to match his comfort level, another of her unique adaptations. Together, the three of them proceeded toward the Great Hall, where representatives from both civilizations awaited. As they entered, a hush fell over the assembled dignitaries. Humans and Solarians stood on opposite sides of the hall, with a central aisle leading to a raised platform. Will and Aurelia walked this path together, their daughter between them, the perfect symbol of their unprecedented union. When they reached the platform, Aurelia stepped forward first, her royal presence commanding attention. Her voice, amplified by the hall's perfect acoustics, carried to every corner. Esteemed representatives of the Solarian Empire and honored delegates from Earth. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning, the dawn of a new understanding between our peoples. For too long, we have viewed our differences as barriers rather than opportunities. Today, we recognize that diversity brings strength, that combination creates possibility, where isolation breeds stagnation. She gestured to Will, who stepped forward with Rory in his arms. Commander Will Watson came to our world by accident, but what followed was no accident. It was the inevitable result of two intelligent species, recognizing in each other not alien otherness, but complementary potential. Will took his cue, addressing the assembly with Rory secure in his embrace. The journey that brought us here was unexpected, but the destination now seems inevitable. Earth and the Solarian Empire have developed along different paths, with different strengths and perspectives. Together, we can achieve far more than either civilization could alone. As if understanding her role in the historic moment, Rory began to glow with increasing brightness, the light expanding outward in gentle waves that washed over the assembled delegates. Where it touched them, expressions of wonder and understanding bloomed. Aurelia continued, "Our daughter, Aurora Dawn, represents the physical embodiment of our new alliance. Born of two worlds, she belongs fully to both, and in her existence, we see the promise of our shared future." Will felt Rory stir in his arms, her tiny hands reaching outward. Suddenly, she projected a vivid holographic display above the assembly, a double helix of DNA. But unlike any seen before, the structure twisted and combined elements of both human and Solarian genetic patterns, forming new configurations that pulsed with possibility. Gasps of amazement echoed through the hall. Scientists from both species leaned forward, captivated by the implications of what they were seeing. "The biological, technological, cultural accord we signed today," Aurelia proclaimed, "establishes not merely peace between our civilizations, but active cooperation and exchange. Joint research initiatives, cultural embassies, and shared governance of border regions will replace the tensions of the past." Will stepped closer to her, so that they stood as a family unit. This accord recognizes that progress comes not from isolation, but from integration, not from fear of difference, but from embracing it. As they concluded their joint address, Rory suddenly laughed, a sound of pure joy that seemed to resonate within everyone present. The sound carried with it an emotional wave of hope and possibility that transcended language. Then, in a final display that would be recorded in the histories of both civilizations, Rory extended her tiny hands and created a bridge of light connecting the human and Solarian delegations. Where the light touched, individuals from opposite sides found themselves instinctively stepping forward to meet in the center, hands extending in gestures of greeting and cooperation. Will and Aurelia exchanged a look of proud amazement as their daughter, not yet a year old, demonstrated more wisdom than millennia of separate evolution had achieved. In that moment, as ancient enemies became tentative friends under the influence of their child's remarkable gift, both parents knew that the impossible future they had imagined together had already begun. Aurora Dawn, child of stars and worlds apart, smiled her mysterious smile as the light of new beginning spread throughout the Great Hall and beyond, to two civilizations poised at the threshold of transformation.